We have covered the work of Norman Douglas in episode 73. Today we will cover his 1901 collection, Unprofessional Tales, and this collection is truly an enigma. It oscillates between the most trivial banality to then catch your attention just as you are about to give up on it, with Douglas writing something dark and grotesque all of a sudden. A mystery has the narrator recount his meeting with his friend the Russian Pomonareff. Only what he met was somehow a caricature of the man given flesh by his longing to see him again, despite being fully physical and having quite an appetite. But the idea gets abandoned as it simply leaves, and the narrator only finds out about its true nature many months later. Elfwater, one of the standout stories of the book, concerns a man living in a cottage close by a stream of ill repute. He is living alone with his mother, whom he hates, and who drove out his wife 20 years ago. When his mother grows blind, he hopes she will have less control over his life, but she doesn't, and she will seemingly never die. So he tries to throw her into the river, but old and blind as she is, she comes back. The sentence is an amazingly pointless non-story of a man doing something and being sentenced to death for it, in about 3 pages. Norinda is a somewhat overlong tale of Donald C. going to Italy to recuperate after an illness, then falling in love with a plaster cast of a dead girl from Pompeii. Initially he is annoying and smug and witty, but he begins to lose his mind, going on about how great it would be to sacrifice a man to his ideal, turning a man into a fountain by cutting 1,000 holes into his yielding flesh. The only issue is there are about 40 pages of waffle that could easily be disposed of and nothing would be lost. Impromptu is a rather toothless satire, where the devil is annoyed no one is afraid of him anymore. So after confirming this from a terrified priest stuck to the end of a pitchfork, he has servants turn against their masters. In an ending I am sure Douglas thought was very meaningful, but it's not. In the Red Sea is a promising story of a sailor being pursued by an apparition with a circular head, a tiger's face, and his dead daughter's eyes. And just as it gets interesting, it ends. Anacreontic is a tedious poem about drinking wine, and that's about it. The ignoble has a government minister, a doctor, and a few friends going over the most horrible ignoble forms of death, mentioning the story of an old, extremely poor woman who got eaten alive by her cats, all watched by a terrified girl too distraught to actually go fetch any help. A Tyrrhenian fable, in extreme contrast, is a fable concerning the daughter of an Atlantean king, who kills herself to avoid her suitors, written in a simplistic, condescending tone. The case of Mrs. Hillier has the narrator travel to Landau in Bavaria, where he meets Mr. Hillier, who tells him how he met his wife at her crazy, snake-obsessed uncle's house, and had to save her from being eaten alive by a giant snake, after her uncle hypnotized her to, well, be eaten alive by a giant snake. To EFG has the narrator talk about a dead duke he knew who never left his house and never did anything. The Devil's Oak is a medieval legend of a man-eating tree who devours a woman and then gets cut down for it and turned into a cross. But a cross that hates being a cross and which no monk or priest can set aright. But despite the interesting premise, the story just ends there again. The psychological moment is a dull affair of an old husband inviting the man his young wife loves to teach her violin, and then getting annoyed when what he expected to happen, well, happens. The meeting of Autos and Eschatta is a short but visceral story of a dead man meeting the last woman who died on Earth, in a corpse-laden world besieged by swarms of giant blood-sucking insects annihilating the whole human race, dying right after seeing her husband and son die horribly in front of her. I have no idea how Douglas put in so much tripe between actual good stuff, but he did.